Richard Foerster was a German classical scholar. Biography. Though born and raised in Görlitz, Foerster never saw himself a Lusatian and felt the strongest allegiance to Silesia, where he studied since winter term 1861 after a semester at Jena. In Breslau he dropped theology and concentrated on classics in a comprehensive way. Apart from Greek and Roman literature, he studied metrics under Rudolf Westphal, archaeology under August Rossbach, Sanskrit under Adolf Friedrich Stenzler. His doctoral thesis was inspired by Friedrich Haas and dealt with a phenomenon in Greek grammar called attractio cassis. From 1866 on, Foerster worked as a substitute teacher at the Maria Magdalena Gymnasium in Breslau. After being promoted to Dr. Phil. in 1866 and earning the Venia Legendivia habilitation in 1868, Foerster was granted the travel stipend of the German Archaeological Institute. The next 2 years he spent in Italy, mostly Rome, where he met many foreign scholars, collated manuscripts and laid the foundation for what was to become his life's work. Critical editions of the Physiognomus and of the works of Libanius. Back at Breslau, Foerster juggled 4 different tasks: teaching elementary Latin and Greek at the gymnasium, holding lectures and seminars at the university, proceeding with his scientific studies and propagating ancient culture in the Schlesische Gesellschaft für Vaterländische Kultur. He eventually resigned from his school position when he was offered an extraordinary chair at the university in 1873. In 1875, Foerster accepted a chair at the University of Rostock, where he worked as third professor of classical philology besides Ludwig Bachmann and Franz Volkmar Fritzsche. Despite being constantly challenged by Fritzsche's difficult personality, Foerster soon came to enjoy his work as professor in Rostock. He was glad about his students, which came to admire him in return. His scientific studies were prolongated by the small and outdated library. After acting as dean of the Faculty of Philosophy in 1879-1880, Foerster went on a research travel to England, Spain, and France, where he collated manuscripts and started his third opus magnum, the collection of the orations of Coricius of Gaza, which were partly unedited at the time. Soon after his return to Rostock, Foerster was called to a chair at Kiel. In Kiel he had a bigger library at his disposal and more students to teach than in Rostock. Relations to his colleagues Peter Wilhelm Forchhammer and Friedrich Blass were complicated and further strained over the years. In a collegial way he only collaborated with the professors extraordinari Friedrich Leo and Ivo Bruns. Among the other professors, Foerster was revered. In 1885 he was elected Dean of the Faculty of Philosophy. In 1886 he was elected Rector of the University. In his ceremonial speech he talked about Die klassische Philologie der Gegenwart, giving his views of the field and of the ideal scientist. In December 1889, Foerster was offered a chair at his alma mater in Breslau. He accepted with great pleasure and went to Breslau in April 1890. For a few years, he worked alongside his old teachers Hertz and Rossbach. After the latter's death, Foerster was put in charge of the Archaeological Museum and made professor of philology and archaeology. He continued teaching and research until his death in 1922, aged 79. Works. Richard Foerster's academic career spanned from the 1860s to the interwar period. Educated a philologist and humanist, Foerster early turned to archaeology and later to art history, but he never quit pursuing his philological tasks, which were his life's work. Physiognomy. Philological and archaeological interests met in Foerster's early enterprise to collate and edit the ancient writings on physiognomy, the art of relating a person's appearance to his character and personality. From Aristotle on, ancient philosophers and sophists had dealt with this matter in different ways. Part of the writing was only extant in Latin or Arabic translation, which Foerster also collated and retranslated. After nearly 25 years, Foerster eventually finished his edition Scriptores Physiognomonici Graecia Latini. It was published in 1893 in 2 volumes and dedicated to August Rosbach, Foerster's former teacher and colleague in Breslau, at his 75th birthday. Libanius. During his time in Italy, Foerster was inspired by Rudolf Hircher to collate the manuscripts of the late antique orator and sophist Libanius of Antiochia. This was a task of major importance for several reasons. Libanius's orations, declamations and progymnasmata had an immense impact on the Byzantine writers because of their Idmaeid Attic, but the only available edition did not meet strict philological standards as it was based only on a selection of manuscripts. Also, the approximately 1500 letters of Libanius were an important historical source for the 4th century AD. But the most recent edition was outdated, and the authenticity of a number of letters was uncertain. Foerster made it his life's work to collate every available manuscript of Libanius's writings himself, present a proper text in an all-new edition, trace Libanius's sources as well as his reception by later authors, put his letters into historical context, and resolve the authenticity issue by analyzing the history of transmission and reception. He succeeded in all these tasks, but not in every way definitively. Whilst his historical commentary on the letters and the textual constitution was often criticized by other scholars, Foerster's main achievement remains the most reliable edition of all the works of Libanius. After a lot of preliminary work, Foerster published his edition of Libani Opera Omnia from 1903 until his death, in 12 volumes. After his death, his pupil Eberhard Richteig completed the final volume and created the Index Coricius of Gaza. While working on Libanius, Foerster was led to the 5th century orator Coricius of Gaza. In Spain he found several manuscripts containing unedited orations by the Gazian, which Foerster published subsequently in minor magazines and indices. He also prepared a complete edition of the orations in a major publishing house, but during his lifetime never actually published it. It was Eberhard Richteig again who, in 1929, brought the edition to publication. Major writings: Questions de retraction annunciationum relativarum qualisquum in alistum in Greca lingua patissimum que apud Grecos poetas fuerat, Berlin 1868. Der Raub und die Rückkehr der Persephone in ihrer Bedeutung für die Mythologie, Literatur und Kunstgeschichte. Stuttgart 1874. Francesco Zambeccari und die Brief des Libanius, ein Beitrag zur Kritik des Libanius und zur Geschichte der Philologie. Stuttgart 1878. Pharnaciana Studien, ein Beitrag zur Frage nach dem Verhältnis der Renaissance zur Antike. Rostock 1880. Scriptores Physiognomonici Graecia Latini, 2 volumes, Leipzig 1893. Reprinted Stuttgart 1994. Johann Jacob Riesch's Brief, Leipzig 1897. Libani Opera, 12 volumes, Leipzig 1903 to 1927. Reprinted Hildesheim 1963, 1985, 1998. Das Erbe der Antike, Festen, Gehalten und Universität Breslau, Breslau 1911. Die Universität Breslau einst und jetzt. für Akademische Reden, Breslau 1919, Chorei Gazi Opera.